Maybe you've been walking through a season that's left you weary, where every prayer feels like it fades into the air unanswered. You've smiled in public, but cried in private. You've wondered if God still sees you, if He still hears the beating of your tired heart. There are moments in life when we look around and it feels as if God has stepped back, as if His voice has grown faint and His presence has become distant. You pray, but the heavens seem still. You cry, but the night answers only with silence. In those moments, your heart begins to wonder, has God left me? Well, but friend, silence is not absence. What looks like distance is often the sacred space where God is doing His deepest work. You see, when everything is loud and full of movement, it's easy to mistake noise for progress. Yet the most profound transformations often happen quietly, like seeds breaking open beneath the soil, unseen but full of promise. God's presence doesn't vanish in your pain, it deepens there. He doesn't withdraw when you struggle to understand. He leans closer. When life presses you into places of loneliness and uncertainty, God isn't standing on the other side, waiting for you to climb out. He's down there in the valley with you. The same God who walked with the 3 men in the fire, who sat beside Daniel in the lion's den, who whispered to Elijah in a gentle breeze. He is sitting right beside you even now. Sometimes His nearness doesn't come wrapped in miracles or thunder. It comes in the quiet strength that gets you out of bed when you don't think you can move. It comes in a peace that doesn't make sense, a sudden calm in the middle of chaos. That's not coincidence. That's God breathing His presence into your weary soul. We tend to believe that if God is with us, everything will be easy. But faith doesn't erase the storm, it anchors us in it. When Jesus calmed the sea, He didn't prevent the storm from coming, He revealed His power through it. That's what God does in your pain. He doesn't always remove it right away. Sometimes He redeems it, shaping your heart into something stronger, gentler, and more like His own. So if you're walking through silence right now, don't mistake it for abandonment. Don't let the stillness convince you that heaven has turned away. The very quietness you feel may be the sacred hush before God moves. He's not punishing you, He's preparing you. He's teaching you to recognize His presence not just in blessings, but in brokenness too. Maybe this season isn't about hearing God's voice. It's about learning to trust His heart. Even when He feels far, He is holding you closer than ever. Even when you can't trace His hand, you can trust His heart. The silence you feel today will not last forever. One day you'll look back and realize it was in that silence that God spoke the loudest. Not in words, but in love. And it's in that quiet love that your faith will find its deepest roots, growing steady and strong, ready for what comes next. There's a common misconception about faith, that it's a steady, unshakable confidence that never wavers, never questions, never trembles. But real faith, the kind that grows roots deep into your soul, doesn't look perfect. It's not always loud or certain. Sometimes faith looks like showing up to pray even when you don't feel a thing. It's whispering, God, I still trust you, with tears in your eyes and doubt in your heart. Faith doesn't mean you never doubt. It means you trust through the doubt. It's the quiet choice to believe, not because everything makes sense, but because you know deep down that God is still good, even when life is not. I think about Thomas, the disciple who couldn't believe until he touched the scars in Jesus' hands. We often call him Doubting Thomas, but maybe he was just Honest Thomas. He wanted to believe, he just needed help to get there. And do you know what Jesus did? He didn't shame him for doubting. He didn't turn away. He came closer. He said, put your finger here. See my hands. Jesus met Thomas in his uncertainty. And that's what He does for you too. When you feel like your faith is small, when you wonder if God is tired of your questions, remember this: God is not disappointed in your humanity. He created you with the capacity to question, to wrestle, to seek. He knows that faith is not the absence of doubt. It's the courage to move forward anyway. There's beauty in the trying. Every time you pray, when you don't feel like it, every time you keep believing, when everything tells you not to, heaven takes notice. God honors the smallest act of trust. Even a flicker of faith can light up the darkest night. Jesus said, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can move mountains. That means you don't have to have perfect faith. You just have to have awesome faith. And God will meet you right there. Sometimes faith feels like walking through fog. You can't see very far ahead, but you take one small step and then another. You don't have the whole picture, but you know who's holding it. Faith is trusting that God sees what you can't. He's guiding your steps, even when the path feels uncertain. Maybe you're in a season where believing feels like lifting a heavy weight. You're tired of hoping, tired of waiting, tired of being disappointed. But friend, don't give up. God sees your struggle. He's not waiting for you to be strong. He's waiting for you to stay open. Let Him carry what you can't. Even if your belief today is just a whisper, it's enough. Because God doesn't measure the size of your faith. He measures the sincerity of your heart. And when He sees that flicker of hope still burning, however dim, He breathes life into it again. Slowly, quietly, your faith begins to grow, not because you forced it to, but because His grace never stopped holding you. And in that tender space, where doubt and faith meet, something sacred happens. There are seasons when life makes you feel invisible, when the people you poured into walk away, when the dreams you prayed for seem to fade, and when your heart whispers, does anyone see me anymore? You can be surrounded by people and still feel unseen. But here's the truth, you are not forgotten. Heaven has not misplaced your name. God still knows exactly where you are, and He hasn't lost sight of the promises He made over your life. In the book of Genesis, there's a woman named Hagar who knew what it felt like to be unseen. She was alone in the desert, rejected and afraid. The world had turned its back on her. But in that desolate place, God met her. He called her by name and comforted her heart. Overwhelmed, Hagar said, "You are the God who sees me." That one moment changed everything for her. She realized she wasn't lost. She was seen. That same God still sees you today. He sees every tear you've cried in silence, every night you've laid awake wondering how you'll make it through. He sees the sacrifices nobody thanked you for, the kindness that went unnoticed, the battles you fought quietly while others thought you were fine. Nothing escapes His eyes, not one sigh, not one prayer whispered in pain. You may feel like your efforts are overlooked, like your prayers have gone unheard, but God has a perfect memory. Every seed of faith you've planted, every act of love you've given, it's all being stored in His hands. And in His perfect time, He will bring forth the harvest. Galatians 6:9 reminds us, let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Maybe you've been waiting a long time for someone to see the good in you, to notice your worth, to validate your heart. But the one who formed you in the secret place already saw it long before anyone else could. When others pass by without noticing, God stops. When the world overlooks, He leans in. He calls you His child, His beloved, His masterpiece. Sometimes God hides you for a season, not because He's forgotten you, but because He's preparing you. He's working behind the scenes, shaping your character, strengthening your faith, and setting the stage for your purpose. Don't mistake His preparation for neglect. You're not being buried, you're being planted, and in time you will bloom in ways you couldn't imagine. So lift your head again. You don't have to fight for visibility when you're already known by the one who holds the stars. You don't need to chase validation when heaven already celebrates you. Rest in the quiet confidence that you are fully seen, deeply loved, and eternally remembered. And it's in that knowing, in that still assurance of being seen by God, that your heart begins to heal, making room for the next truth waiting to unfold. There are times when life feels like it's falling apart, when doors close, plans crumble, and everything you counted on seems to slip through your fingers. It's in those moments we ask, God, where are you in this? You prayed for healing, but the report didn't change. You believed for a breakthrough, but it still hasn't come. You thought things were finally turning around, and then another setback came out of nowhere. But here's what I've learned: every setback in life is a setup for renewal. What looks like an ending to you is often the beginning of something God is rebuilding, something stronger, deeper, and more beautiful than what you lost. Think about Joseph in the Old Testament. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and thrown into prison for something he didn't do. Everything seemed to be going wrong. From the outside, it looked like his story was one of disappointment and loss. But what Joseph couldn't see was that God was using every twist, every heartbreak to position him for destiny. By the time it was over, Joseph stood as a ruler in Egypt, saying to his brothers, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." That's how God works. He takes the things that were meant to break you and turns them into the very things that build you. The pain that tried to destroy you becomes the soil where your new purpose grows. Sometimes the breaking point is not a punishment. It's the birthplace of your next chapter. Maybe you've been asking God, why did this have to happen? Why did I lose that job? Why did that relationship end? But perhaps the better question is, God, what are you trying to renew in me through this? Every disappointment carries a seed of transformation. You may not see it yet, but God is rewriting the story with redemption in mind. The renewal often doesn't happen all at once. It comes slowly, like dawn breaking after a long night. One small sign of hope here, one unexpected blessing there. God begins to breathe life into places that felt barren. You start to feel joy again, even in little things. You start to see purpose in your pain. Isaiah 4:19 says, "See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do not perceive it." Sometimes the hardest part is believing that new life can come from old wounds. But that's the power of God. He specializes in resurrection. He doesn't just restore what was lost. He brings forth something entirely new. So if you're standing in the ruins of what once was, lift your eyes. God is not finished. The same hands that allowed the breaking are the hands that will rebuild. You may not understand the process, but one day you'll look back and realize the very thing that felt like your ending was the place where God began something new. And as that truth settles into your heart, you'll find a quiet strength rising again, ready to carry you into the next promise waiting to unfold. There are moments in life when the path ahead seems uncertain, when you can't see what's next, and all the plans you carefully laid out no longer make sense. You pray for direction, but heaven feels quiet. You search for answers, but the road is covered in fog. It's in those moments that God whispers the same truth He has spoken for generations. When you can't see the way, trust the one who is the way. Faith was never meant to be a spotlight that shows you the whole journey. It's a lantern that lights just enough for the next step. You may not see the destination, but God does. He sees the bigger picture, the turns, the detours, the open doors that are still ahead. What feels like delay to you is often divine protection. What feels like confusion is sometimes God's way of guiding you away from what would have harmed you. I think about the Israelites standing at the edge of the Red Sea. Behind them was Pharaoh's army, and in front of them, nothing but water. They couldn't see a way forward. To the natural eye, it was hopeless. But what they didn't know was that God was about to make a way where there was no way. Moses raised his staff, and the sea parted. What looked impossible became the very path that led them to freedom. That's what happens when you trust the one who is the way. Maybe you've been praying for God to show you every step, to explain how it's all going to work out. But friend, if you knew everything, you wouldn't need faith. God reveals the journey little by little because He wants you to learn to lean on Him, not your understanding. Proverbs 305 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." That verse doesn't promise clarity. It promises companionship. It says, "In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths." Sometimes God's guidance comes disguised as stillness. You're waiting for a booming voice, and instead He gives you peace. That quiet assurance in your heart, that's His hand leading you. When you feel unsettled, that's often God's gentle warning. And when something deep inside feels calm, even when it doesn't make sense, that's His permission to move forward. He speaks not just through miracles, but through the language of peace. You may not have all the answers right now, but that doesn't mean you're lost. You are being led step by step, moment by moment. God has already walked the road ahead of you. He's not asking you to figure everything out. He's asking you to trust that He already has. And as you take one small step at a time, you'll discover that the way you couldn't see before begins to open right beneath your feet. The fog starts to lift. Not all at once, but slowly, beautifully. Just enough to keep you walking, just enough to keep you believing. And in that gentle rhythm of trust, your heart begins to rest again, preparing you for the next lesson of faith waiting quietly ahead. There's a quiet beauty in realizing that God never asked us to be strong all the time. He doesn't expect perfection. He longs for surrender. The world teaches us to stand tall, keep our guard up, and never show weakness. But God's way is different. His strength flows best through open hands and humble hearts. When you reach the end of your own ability, that's often the very moment when His power begins to move. God doesn't need you to be strong. He just needs you to stay open. That's the posture where miracles happen, where grace fills the empty spaces that effort can't reach. Sometimes we think faith means having it all together, keeping a brave face, pretending we're fine. But real faith is the courage to say, "Lord, I can't do this alone." I think about Paul's words in 2 Corinthians 12. He wrote about a thorn in the flesh, something painful he begged God to take away. But God's response wasn't what Paul expected. The Lord said, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul could have been frustrated, but instead he said, "I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me." What a beautiful truth, that our frailty isn't a flaw, it's an invitation. When life feels heavy, when your strength runs out and your faith feels thin, that doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're human. And it's in that human space where tears fall and prayers stumble that God draws closest. The same God who carried Elijah when he was too tired to go on, who strengthened David when he was hiding in caves, who comforted Mary as she wept at the tomb, He will carry you too. Sometimes staying open just means refusing to shut down. It's waking up one more morning and saying, "God, I still believe you're with me." It's choosing to keep your heart tender when it would be easier to grow bitter. Openness doesn't mean you never hurt. It means you invite God into the hurt. It's letting Him sit with you in the pain instead of pushing Him away. You don't have to fix yourself before coming to God. You don't have to clean up your doubt, your fear, or your exhaustion. Bring Him the real you, the tired, messy, uncertain you. Because the same God who spoke galaxies into existence can handle your tears. He can take what's broken and turn it into something holy. And as you begin to rest in that truth, you'll feel something gentle take root inside of you, a quiet peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. You'll realize that the strength you were striving for was never something you had to earn. It's something God gives freely, moment by moment, as you stay open to Him. And in that sacred openness, your heart begins to soften again. ready to receive the next whisper of His presence, the next unfolding of grace waiting just ahead. There comes a moment after the tears, after the waiting, when your heart begins to understand what your faith has been whispering all along. You were never alone. Every quiet prayer, every sleepless night, every time you thought you couldn't make it, God was there, not distant, not disinterested, present, gentle, patiently weaving beauty from your broken places. Maybe you didn't feel Him. Maybe all you felt was pain. But even in that pain, He was holding you together. Every breath you took, when you didn't think you could go on, was His grace carrying you. You may not have seen His hand, but you have always been in His arms. When life feels uncertain, when faith feels small, remember God has never abandoned you. He's not finished with your story. The same God who brought light out of darkness, who raised hope from empty tombs, is still working in the unseen corners of your life. Your silence is not wasted. Your struggle is not forgotten. Your waiting is not in vain. He is teaching you to believe again, not in what you can control, but in who He is. Not in perfect circumstances, but in perfect love. So as you leave this moment, take this truth with you. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be strong every day. Just keep your heart open. Keep your faith alive, even if it's just a flicker. God is closer than you think, and He's already gone before you, preparing peace for your tomorrow. You're never alone. You never have been, and you never will be. Because the same God who walked with you through the storm will walk with you into the sunrise until your heart learns to believe again.